Welcome back to Pipeline to Profit, the podcast where we talk about how companies build better revenue engines through smarter systems, better data, and more connected go to market strategies. Today's episode is called Why Manufacturing Can't Stay Stuck in the 1980s. I'm joined by Cordell England from Wirco, a company serving high temperature processes in the steel and industrial manufacturing space. Wirco operates in a highly specialized industry where quality, precision, lead time, and technical expertise matter deeply. Cordell has a unique perspective because he came into Wirco as their first internal marketing hire and has helped the company think through digital marketing, CRM adoption, data visibility, trade shows, and what modernization really looks like in a legacy manufacturing environment. Cordell, welcome to the show. To start, I'd love for listeners to get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about your background and how you ended up in marketing at Wirco?
Yeah, just to kind of sum it up, honestly, as quick as I can. I originally started when I got to college. I was always in business, right? There's a funny story on how I started in business, but the I was originally in economics, and then I realized that there wasn't really like quite the occupational outlook for me that I liked, and then I switched to accounting. And then I thought I wanted to be a CPA, and then kind of realized it wasn't for me. I wasn't really into, crunching numbers all the time. And then I switched my degree to marketing and with a minor in analytics. And that's where it kind of all meshed together in terms of because I like all facets of business, right? Like I like
Right.
finance and process procurement and supply chain and marketing and all of those things, right? But I started with that. And then once I got into my marketing degree, it kind of was, and I'm sure other people have had this experience too, but I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I didn't really know what to expect or how to handle it. So my first couple years in college, they weren't great, right? I really had to learn the type of learner that I was and change all my study habits and everything. And then that's when I realized for me to, it sounds cliche, but to do something really well, I have to be very interested in. It was very hard for me to stay interested in early years in college and things that I didn't think had any validity for me, I guess. But once I got into the harder classes, that's when I really excelled in a lot of like deep, in depth group projects and analytic studies and just like overall encompassing of like business processes itself. So then that made me really like marketing. And then I worked in the automotive industry for about 4 years. I worked at a car dealership, did minor tasks, and then I got into their marketing and merchandising position. And then that's when I started learning a little bit more about industrial and supply chain and automation. And so that kind of struck kind of like a raz in my brain. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I think I like this. And then once I got into how cars would be built and how cars would be shipped to us and how we would handle all those processes, I was like, okay, I think I really like this, right? So I was there for about 4 years. I did that for about a year and a half, and then I left there and I went to big corporate America. Right, I was at Do It Best headquarters here in Fort Wayne, which was a B2C industry, right? So the Do It Best hardware stores where they have all the tools and things like that. I was a consumer marketing specialist there. So that's where I had about 500 or 600 stores. The store owners would call me and I would help them with planograms and layouts in their store and certain promotions that they might have had going on at the time, whether it be for paint or whatever, right? Whatever it may be that they needed. And then I was there for about a year and a half. And then that role, it was not necessarily a knock on them, but it was pretty constrictive. I felt like I didn't really get a chance to be creative all the time. So I felt like I was kind of in a box, right? I didn't get a chance to really learn all the things that I felt like that I could. Then Worko opened up and they opened up position. Just so happened they put the job out that day that I just so happened to be looking, right? And I got called in for an interview and they really liked me, thank God, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my father has worked in a machine shop his whole life, right? So I've been around lathes and drill presses and welders and fabricators and steel since I was 4 years old. I kinda already knew the blue collar industry I was kinda getting into, but once we got into it, I kind of was just like, okay, I really get to start something from scratch here, right? Because for a long time, they have a lot of people here wear a lot of hats, and marketing was one of those things that they knew was important. They knew they had to get on the horse to get up to speed with things, because if not, the longer you wait, the more it's going to be harder for you to catch up, right? I started here, it'll be 3 years in about a month. So July 10th, I believe, is when I started in 23.
Wonderful.
So it's been a lot of fun. It's been challenging at times, but I wouldn't change it for the world. We do a lot of cool stuff.
Amazing. And so knowing that you were coming into Worko as like their first internal marketing hire, what was that like? Like, what were some of the challenges that maybe you faced with that?
I would say the first challenge, honestly, was getting set up, right? I mean, like
Mhm.
seeing where everything is at like a starting foundation, because for years we grew by trade shows and word of mouth and door to door sales, which it's very much still needed within our industry and our company, because our industry itself is very proprietary. It's very hard to get in there. You have to have the technical expertise and knowledge to be able to talk with the people who are going to be buying our products. But I would say the hardest thing right off the get go was I need to be making data driven decisions. Where's this data coming from, and where's this data at? Where's it housed? And what are the sources that we're using? That whole first year was finding the right vendor for us to help aid my efforts, on top of, because I do our print and our trade shows, I help with sales, so I can't just do digital marketing all day long.
Right.
So that was the first step. And then going through and setting up all of our data to be tracked properly. Because as years have gone on, you kind of have different vendors come in here and there. You kind of do stuff for cheap. You kind of don't, kind of put a band aid. I mean, just sometimes the data can get all misconstrued in a bunch of different places. So the whole first year was figuring out where it came from, where it was, what we wanted it to go, and who we kind of wanted to help us with that. And then other than that, it was really just understanding that our products are so unique and our processes are so unique. And a lot of times people within our industry, whether it be our competitors or our customers, they might have bits and pieces of what we do, but we're fully integrated, right? So we do everything from start to finish. As a marketing person, being the only one, you have to know at least bits and pieces of everything that we do, right? At least to some degree,
Right.
to be able to talk profoundly and execute product strategy effectively.
Right. That's a good transition to my next question. So, for some of our listeners who may not be very familiar with what Worko does or your particular industry, how would you explain what Worko does and how it's unique in this particular industry?
Yeah, so we've kind of done some pivots since our inception of when we became Wirco. When we were founded, we originally were a heat treater. Okay,
Mhm.
so a heat treater is, they have a shop floor and they have these big, huge furnaces that, long story short, you got to heat widgets up to be very, very hot to make them more durable. And then they get quenched in oil or they get hardened in some process or whatever it may be. And so that goes into whatever industry that is having, whether it be metal on metal, they might be going in high heat for the furnaces and things like that, or whatever product the end is. And then after years of doing that, we realize, like, okay, if we purchase a foundry, we can make the products that go inside these furnaces, right? So, and that's what we
Mhm.
do today, right? And we've grown since then. We've acquired another foundry, we've acquired two other businesses to help aid our product catalog, if you will, right? So we do castings and fabrications. And then we do a mixture of, some products have castings and fabrications with them in one. But we make products for all different types of furnaces for all industries, right? So it's not just necessarily commercial or captive heat treaters, it's anybody that has that, right? So
Right.
like aerospace, construction, agricultural, all of those things need parts for whatever parts they're selling, or in their processes, their parts need to be heat treated. So we make all different types of products that help aid those furnaces, whether it be helping the furnaces run. So like one product that we use to help furnaces run is like a cast radiant tube. And that is something that would, depending on where the placement of the furnaces, some furnaces are older, some are newer, some have been worked on and some haven't. So you always have this niche one off scenario where got to be kind of smaller, got to be kind of bigger. But the radiant tubes, they might sit on the side of the furnace or up top, maybe wherever it may be. And it helps radiate the heat through it to keep that temperature at one solid temperature in the furnace, right? And I think the highest we go make I think it's 2300 degrees.
Nice. And then you mentioned in some of our initial discussions that Worko is vertically integrated. And what
Yeah.
does that mean and matter for your customers?
Yeah. For us, vertical integration, we're completely domestic to the US, right? So we
Hmm.
don't outsource anything. The only thing that we will outsource is if we have to. And usually that's something like tungsten, because tungsten is
Hmm.
not in the US. You have to get that from overseas.
Right.
And that's can be some things that we battle where obviously with the things going on in the economy right now and trade wars and tariffs and all these things, those can skyrocket prices. So it makes us shift and pivot and figure out ways we can have different avenues for our customers to still be able to buy our products. But from the rawest of material through to the product, we see it all the way through. We get it, we melt it, we pour it, we cast it, we fabricate it, we weld it, we ship it, we send it out. It's from cradle to grave. Uh,
Nice.
we really feel like that's important, not only just because it helps the lead time factor, because we want to make sure our customers are getting our products on time when they need it,
Hmm.
specifically for this industry, because these furnaces cost a lot of money. And it's a
Right.
huge expense for these companies. So when these products are late or if they're not up to quality standards, it can cost them a lot of money. And not just fixing the furnace itself, but their downtime in general, losing business, losing load time, losing shipping dates, that's a big deal, right?
Hmm.
With us being vertically integrated, not only helps just with the quality and the lead time, but emphasizing supply chain security, especially now in today's day and age, is something that I always stress to our team and our customers and whoever it is that wants to talk about Worko, is that anytime that we hear well, our customers dropping the ball because they got to wait 6 months for a tray or 8 months for a
Right.
cast tube, like we can crush that number, right? And
Hmm.
that's one of our things that we constantly innovate and strive and build towards, is figuring out a way to make that better as much as possible all the time.
Nice. And when it comes to like modernizing your business, I can understand that a lot of people might think that's adding new software, but for a business like yours, modernization really has to support that actual operational reality of the
Yeah.
business. And so, knowing that and tying that back to the title of our episode of why manufacturing can't stay stuck in the 1980s, from your perspective, where do you feel that manufacturing companies tend to get stuck?
Like I said, I've said this before, but it sounds cliche, but I feel like they tend to get stuck when they feel like they're forced to innovate in a way.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like they almost feel like they have to recreate the wheel, or they almost have to come up with something that is just so out of this world, or, so extravagant that it's like sliced bread, right? And I don't think that's the case. For example, it could be, they're stuck at this cap where it's like they can't
Hmm.
quite get over that revenue hump, or they can't quite get over that production capacity hump to where it's like, "Man, we just can't get it." And I think when you get to the point of innovation, I think it's super important to look at everything you have right now and then see what is cost effective that you can change, minor changes, right? To see over
Hmm.
time and as it builds, if that affects it in a big positive way. Cause a lot of times it does, right? Our VP of Worko, he's a product wizard, right? I mean, he's been in it for
Hmm.
30 years and he's forgotten stuff that I'll never know, right? So it's like in
Hmm.
getting input and feedback from multiple team members that have that knowledge, you have so much knowledge already. I feel like a lot of times when you get stuck or when you try to innovate and you feel like you don't know, you need to go back and look at the core root and the core growth of what made your business grow and see what can change from that.
Right. And kind of tying back to that, there's a mix of what's new versus traditionally things that have worked, right? And
Yeah.
so when I think of that, I would love to know what parts of traditional manufacturing, sales, and marketing do you feel still work today versus what may be causing issues with some of this attempted innovation for innovation's sake?
Yeah, I think one thing that, specifically speaking for my industry, the technical expertise, it's needed, right? I could read heat treating books for 3 years straight, and I could
Uh-huh.
try to go in and sell certain things to people, and they would look at me almost like I'm crazy. you've gotta have this, I don't wanna say tenured, but kind of, right? This tenured
Mhm.
resume of, "Oh, well, they've seen this type of furnace, and he knows about those furnaces, and they don't even make them anymore, but these guys on the East Coast still does," and, you have to have that technical expertise still in showcasing that the quality of the product that they're standing behind is valid, right? I think that
Mhm.
kinda goes hand in hand, and I still think trade shows too, I think they're important. I think they're misinterpreted nowadays. I think a lot of people assume that trade shows are, oh, they're just gonna go and do this and stand around, and but it's really what you make of it, right? It's just like anything
Right.
else. If you're strategic with the trade show, you can get the leads you want, you can see the people you want, you can have the conversations you want. And more
Mhm.
than likely in those big settings when all those like-minded people are around, they're more willing to have open conversations about problems that they might be facing because they feel more comfortable. So I would say that for sure.
Wonderful. And then when it comes to the leadership at Worko, I'm sure that you have your leadership team and they're like, great, go ahead, do some things that are innovative. And we want you to try something new because that's how we get new results, right? And so when
Mhm.
you think about when is the right time to invest in something new, and how do you feel that the leadership team has helped support you with moving forward with some of these new innovative ideas?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say Worko's team here, and like I said, it sounds cliche, but I've worked at multiple places, and this place really does feel like a family in a way.
Hmm.
It's very open and honest, right? And it's kind. They give a lot of grace, and they realize that there are some things in life, but also specifically with marketing that you just have to try. You have
Right.
to try things. You have to give it a shot and see where it goes from there, especially when, like in my case, coming in as the first ever marketing in-house person, we don't have anything to go off. We've got to build something and analyze it and see what we can make it, how we can make it better. But they're great with innovation. They're really good at getting feedback and red teaming certain things to see if it's a yay or nay, if you will.
Hmm.
But they're really good at that. And like they said, whenever they're going through innovations and they want to try something new, they bring in that expertise. They bring in those people that are going to be like, hey, I like the idea, but I would change this. Or,
Hmm.
hey, you got a good idea, but I would change this and not this, right? It just it having that willingness to sit down and be humble in a way and let people showcase their knowledge to help them. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why, in my opinion, versus our competitors, we are far better than them in that way because we're willing to take the expenses, right, and buy into making it work. And I think when you have a team that's willing to make an investment work, I think you have a much higher success rate.
Mhm, and that certainly sounds like Worko's not trying to abandon what worked 20 years ago, but instead you're really just
No,
trying to evolve it and just make things better and better as the years go on. Can you maybe
100%.
talk a little bit more about an example where your team has done that?
Yeah. So, for example, I think it was towards the end of the first year I was
Mhm,
here, our foundry in Champaign, Illinois, that was the first one that we purchased in 2005. We acquired a 3D sand printer, right?
mhm,
And what that is, it's binder jet sand. So it's
mhm,
really cool and it's really unique and it was a big investment for us. But one of the things that it's helped us so much is testing and core printing. Now we don't have to use manual labor and all the people that were doing the cores and stuff like that, we can have them progress or do something else and work on bigger projects or whatever the case may be. However, the production teams have them handle that, right?
mhm.
But that's helped us turn around castings and prototypes within 24 hours. I mean,
Wow.
before 20 years ago, it probably would have taken days. So it just overall speeds that up. But I mean, the X1 team was great. I worked really closely with them and their marketing team to get us content, and they did a white paper on us, and we talked about the widgets and production times and everything. So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then we're always big into investing in our facilities, right? Not just the equipment inside, but the overall people and things like that. Our
Nice.
second foundry that we acquired, which was Performance Industrial Products, they're a smaller foundry in Wisconsin. But I mean, the last couple years, we've got them up to code for ventilation and heating and cooling and certain lathes and grinders and everything. And because we want to give our team the best possible scenario for them to learn and grow and make, because in turn that's going to help us make higher quality products, right? And that's what we
Right.
want for our customers.
Exactly. And I feel like everything you're saying, it really connects to revenue operations because a lot of this modernization comes down to not just the systems and the data, but it's also how those teams end up working together. Right. And so, thinking about some of how this all comes together, you mentioned that Worko recently moved from Salesforce over to Zoho. What led to that decision and what's working for you now?
When I started here, I had previously only ever worked with Salesforce before.
Hmm.
And when I worked with Salesforce before, it was more of in a B2C realm. Never really worked with Salesforce before here that was in B2B. And when we originally had Salesforce, there was some things of it we liked, right? We had a lot of data in there and it was in searchability for some of our team members. It was very easy quoting. It was easy for us to go find all the information, but in terms of process to help us move things quick and to have it be integrated, it wasn't great. We had it for years and we kind of just ended up putting band-aids on things, right? We
Right.
never really got to the root problem. And everything is derived from our ERP visual, right? So that's like our what we call gospel, right?
Hmm.
It's like our gospel of data. So that's the main one that we need to make sure is protected because
Right.
that's where all the data lives. But after we were kind of in it for a little bit and we knew that we had to make some changes and we're like, man, how can we speed up the quoting process? How can we get these POs logged and save some time from customer service and not have them manually print and then reprint and then write and then validate, and things like that.
Right.
So it was kind of just like an overall us switching from Salesforce to Zoho. I mean, there was some people that, probably use Salesforce a little bit better, but overall the company for Zoho, they touched all of our departments in a more effective way than what we were at before. Uh, and
Right.
when we had Salesforce, we had to have quite a few other softwares that were
Hmm.
costing us a lot of money to keep us doing the things that we wanted to, and Zoho mitigated a lot of those. They took away a
Hmm.
lot of those costs. So, but then we have to
Right.
go in, and now we're learning a new CRM. We're doing things more efficiently, but it's different. So there's still some snags, right? We got to figure
Hmm.
out how we want things to, in essence, talk to each other sometimes, just because since it is for years, we did a thing one way. And when you're trying to integrate that data into a new CRM and certain things don't talk the right way, you got to learn that, right? And you got to
Right.
figure out what it is that you want it to be and how you want it to coordinate with each other and then have the team understand what that new information is. It's actually this, right? So,
Hmm.
but overall, it's been good. We have about a 3-step process with Zoho of what we want to do with it. We're
Hmm.
still in stage one. We're still in the early stages of learning and getting used to it, but it's been good so far.
Oh, very nice. And I know in our initial conversations, you said something that I absolutely loved that was tying back to some of this. And it was, I don't think there's such a thing as good or bad data. I just think there's
Yeah.
data, right? Can you unpack
Yeah.
that a little bit and maybe tell me what that means in practice?
Yeah. So I really came up with that conclusion probably about halfway when I was through at my last job. And that was a B2C, but now I'm in B2B. And then when I started in this new role, I had this frame in my mind. I was like, okay, it's got to go like this. It's got to be like this. It's got to be like this. And I'm looking at this data and where it's coming from or what it's missing. And I'm like, well, what is going on? And then I'm like, well, there's my answer. What is going on? Right?
Mm.
Like, what is happening? So I flip the perspective of it. And I have a joke running with my friends that I'm kind of like a beige flag, right? I'm neutral. I don't really get too high or too low on a lot of things. And I think I applied that concept to when I'm looking at data, right? If someone comes to me and they're like, hey, let's run this ad campaign and let's do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, then we'll put some research into it. We'll see how it goes. And say we run that ad campaign for 4 months. Then we say, okay, we've ran it for 4 months. What are we seeing out of it? And then I look at what are we getting out of it? And then I'm like, okay, if this in our eyes is not good, let's go back and look at it. And then you get granular and you're like, okay, but we also got organic reach from customers that we haven't heard from in 10 years. Or we got people from outside of the US that really want to do business with us and that are willing to pay the ship or whatever the case may be, right? And I think that's kind of like the adage I go with because if you think there's good and bad data, I don't think you're ever really going to get the full picture of what your data is presenting to you. So if
Right.
you have good data, great. Keep that thing rolling. Keep giving it the fire. Don't turn the gas off, right? If it ain't broke, don't
Hmm.
fix it. But if it's bad, ask yourself, why is it bad? You have to ask yourself, and especially as a marketer, you trial by fire, right? I mean, there's times where I'm like, yeah, this ad's gonna hit nothing, right? And it's
Hmm.
like, okay, why didn't it work? And then it's like, okay, then I'm gonna go through and well, that keyword was good. Oh, okay, well, this worked. But now I learned that's still something good. No matter
Right.
the data set, the more data you have, the more you can analyze, the more you can make decisions from because you have a bigger data set. And I think that thought process is critical. And a lot of people probably don't agree with it. I just feel like if you try to make it black and white, you're not going to be able to get the full image of where you're at. So,
Hmm. Nope, that makes a lot of sense. And that mindset I feel like is so important because a lot of companies, they want better reporting, they want better forecasting, they want to be able to make better decisions, they want to add AI into the mix. But in order to be able to do that, they really need to be able to understand the data that they have and how it can be applied, right? So
right.
when I think about another piece of modernization that everyone's talking about right now, it's AI. But in manufacturing, that AI really has to be applied carefully and practically, right? So when it comes
Yeah.
to AI and analytics, what types of conversations are you having within Worko right now?
Yeah. I think a lot of the conversations within AI, a lot of us here, they view it as a friendly tool. There's still some people here that are wary, which I understand. There's a lot of uncertainty in it. And I think the uncertainty is not necessarily because we don't think that it can help. I think it's because it's growing so exponentially fast.
Right.
It's growing so fast that we haven't really had a lot of time to sit down and be with it and see how it's growing, right? Because if you go back and look at all major innovations in the past, like I talk to people all the time about the year 2000, right? And like when the internet was coming out and all of those changes that were going on, everybody thought the world was going to catch on fire, but it didn't. It's just people had to learn something new, learn the new tool. I mean, if you were to take somebody from 1945 and then place them in today, they might spontaneously combust into flames. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
just like it's a tool. And I think people are wary of it because it's growing so fast. And I don't think people understand how to use it fully. And since they don't know how to use it fully, I think a lot of people are applying a negative connotation to it because all we hear is, oh, it's going to take our jobs. It's going to take this. It's going to do this. But in my opinion, no matter how intricate and how creative this AI can be, it's a tool and it's
Hmm.
only going to grow with what you give it. If you give it junk, it's going to be junk. It's same thing. If you give it good information, it can help you, right? And it's kind of the
Hmm.
same process as like a good and bad data type thing. If something is bad, you can still change it, right? You can still fix it.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of uncertainties with
Hmm.
AI, but I definitely think now as I talk to other people in marketing and especially like graphic design and like all of those things where you can create things on a whim, right? You can
Right.
just make it happen from right in your brain and you can just type it in and it's right there and it gets pretty close. But as we've seen, there's certain things where, well, they're pulling from Reddit or they're pulling from Wiki, and that's true, right? I mean,
Right.
the sources that it's pulling from, you can't always think that it's 100% guaranteed. You still have to understand what it is you're looking for because you have to
Hmm.
still ask it the right questions. You still have to ask AI to build things the right way of how you want it. It's just a tool in helping you get things done quicker. When people say that it's going to take jobs and stuff like that, I can see it doing in some regard, but I don't see it happening at the magnitude that it is because with where we are now in a society, things change so fast anyway. It's not
Right.
like AI has been building for the last 40 years to where it's like, we've been building it for 40 years. Here's the launch date. It doesn't
Hmm.
really work that way. The biggest thing when I do public speaking, and a lot of kids ask me about AI, and because a lot of them are, well, what's the point of going to college or what's the point of this or that and stuff? I was like, well, you still have to know what you want to do, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's still the main thing. You still have to have some sort of passion for whatever it is. And it's a tool. And the biggest thing is, it's not emotion. You can't teach it real emotion because emotion from me to you, it can't replicate that. right? And like obviously we see people have robots and walking things and talking robots, but our brains know that it's not a real person. So regardless
Hmm.
of how much we think it can help us, we always are going to have that clear line that's cut that we understand that it's like, okay, it's a tool, right? So that's kind of my thought on it. And with applying AI to industrial applications, I think where AI is really helping it is just like assembly line,
Hmm.
manufacturing to where it can really hone in on precise things that can take away menial tasks from people who don't need to be doing it already and can focus on other things. And that's the sort of tool that I think it should be viewed at. I think Worko understands that that's where it's at. I think we're just waiting to see how it still continues to develop a little bit to where we could apply it. Because I mean, people here, we use it every day, right? But
Right.
in terms of like integral processes that really affect the core of our business, our strategy, that's where we run into the weariness, right? Is because we have a lot of secrets, if you will, that we feel weary of just putting that out there.
Right. And I think that's a totally valid point. Like when you're in a company, even though a new tool might be available to you, just because you can implement it doesn't necessarily mean that you should implement it. Really, it's about, does this solve a particular business problem? Does it support our people? Or does it instead complicate things and make it more difficult for us to do our jobs? And so being able to evaluate that effectively at a company level, that's where things become pretty critical. And so that practical mindset seems not only to just show up in the different technology choices that Worko is choosing in, but it's also in how you think about your people and your culture, correct? It sounded like you talked earlier about the importance of recruiting knowledgeable people who are humble, who want to learn. And why do you feel that that's so important in your particular industry?
Because this industry, it's not necessarily glamorous, right? I guess if one way to put it, there's a lot of cool processes and there's a lot of science that goes into it. And there's a lot of time and effort and labor that is involved to make this industry work. And the world is predicated around the steel industry, right? I mean,
Mhm,
the steel industry itself, when that is down, America feels it. When it's up, we thrive and we're a small part in that big pond, but what we do really, really does help people. And you can break it down to things as in we do stuff for aerospace, right? We help make parts that help heat treat things properly for planes that carry people through the air. It's like when you break it down into that regard and all the other industries that we serve. We work with agriculture people, farmers. I mean, their stuff has to be heat treated properly for the products that they buy to help farm the crops properly so that way they can have an adequate living. That's
mhm,
heat treating components touch everyday life in multiple industries. And when you have people that really care about that and see that passion and want that knowledge, naturally they're more humble because you're already giving before you even learn about what we do. And that's kind of the culture that we want. But then also, our industry is super niche and unique and custom and one off. There might be times where we might get a product made this year and we might not have it made for another 10. We don't know, but we're going to have that knowledge. Right. And then that's a differentiator that we always like to talk about it. We got probably over 20,000 prints or something like that. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's a lot. Right. We
mhm,
have a pattern inventory, a legitimate multiple buildings with hand drawn, hand built wooden patterns and metal patterns that we use that we've saved for years and years that we can go back and teach and learn and show and grow from all the things that we've built. So I think the most important thing is because if you come into this industry and be humble and have some humility, it's only gonna show you the coolest things because it
mhm.
is really neat.
No, that sounds great. And when you're thinking about manufacturing companies that are out there who may be listening to this podcast, who know that they need to modernize but have no idea where to start, what type of advice do you think you would give them?
I think the biggest thing is you need to get your group of people, whoever your decision makers are, you need to get them all in, whether it is you want to commit to it or not. Right?
Mhm,
That's the first one because if you get in there and you start chasing the silver ball or the shiny ball, and you're thinking, well, what if this happens? Well, what if this happens? And how can we fix this if this happens? You don't know that yet, right? It's anxietal, right? You don't understand. It hasn't happened yet. You don't know. You got to cross that bridge when you come to it, and you got to get your decision makers in and understand, like, okay, this is where we're going, and this is what we want to do. We're willing to take those jumps and hurdles to see if we can get there, because more risk, more reward. I mean, that's kind of the adage, right? If you want to be a first mover advantage, you're going to see things and go through things that other people don't, and that's usually why, if you're able to conquer that the first time, you have an advantage.
Hmm.
So I would say that's the first thing. And then the second thing would be, after you get your decision makers together and you decide what direction is that you want to go, you need to legitimately make an effort, not just for SOPs, but figure out, if you don't have the staff currently to go towards what it is that you're wanting to do, you really need to invest in your recruiting or your research
Hmm.
and what it is of who you want to bring in that to help you aid that, right? You need to bring, and I'm speaking for the young people here, I guess, because I'm 28. When I was younger, I always felt like, man, they're never going to give me a shot. I don't have the experience. Everybody goes through that. But like with Wirco, they're great at this, but investing in that youth, giving them a chance to showcase and learn from them, right? To show them, like, "Hey, I learned this. Yeah, I haven't been in college in 20 years. What's it like out?" You know what I mean? Stuff
Hmm.
like that. I think after you go through and make the decision of what you wanna do, you need to hone in on your craft and figure out who it is that can help you do that. And then it's trial by fire, right? You
Right.
put together a plan, you put your best foot forward, and you have to be willing to pivot, not once or twice, but probably 40 to 50 times minimum. It's going to happen.
Hmm.
But I think if you go to it with grace and understand that when your whole team is on that same page and understand that those things will happen, I think it makes the decision making process easier. It makes the buying process easier, like what you're putting your investment towards, and who it is that you're hiring to come in to help you build that, right? If you need to hire somebody, I think it kind of starts there.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Cordell, I feel like this has really been a great conversation. Now, I'd love for our listeners to be able to learn more about Worko. Where can they go in order to do that?
Yeah, www.worko.com. Super easy. But LinkedIn is our main social platform because it's B2B. Obviously, it's the most credible site out there for what it is in the industry that we're in, for industry professionals. We have some socials, obviously, Instagram and Facebook. Those are a little bit less tame just because it's harder to get a lot of the normal mom and dads interested in metal, right? But I usually
Hmm.
use those for more community involvement when we do fundraisers and career fairs and things like that. So those are the main ones. And then also, if you guys are ever at trade shows and you happen to see our name, come over and say hi. We'd love to
Oh,
talk to you.
fantastic. Oh, I'm sure they definitely will. And I can tell you from my side, I really appreciate you joining us and sharing such a practical perspective on manufacturing modernization, data, marketing, and innovation. And for
Yeah.
everyone listening, we'll definitely include links to Worko and the episode resources in the show notes. And I want to say thank you all for joining us on Pipeline to Profit, and we'll see you the next time.
Thank you so much.